Chicago didn't become a global city overnight. It grew out of a mix of quiet riverfronts, trading posts, muddy streets, bold experiments, devastating fires, and big ambitions. In this video, we walk through that early history, one image at a time, with the help of AI reconstructions that bring long-lost scenes back to life. Chicago in 1820 was little more than a meeting place at the edge of vast open land. This illustration shows a quiet stretch along the river, where a few cabins sat close to the water and canoes moved at an easy pace. The landscape feels wide and untouched, shaped more by nature than by people. You can see how the river's bends guided early travel and trade, long before streets or railways took over. It's a simple scene, but it captures the moment when Chicago was still a frontier outpost, waiting for the growth that would change it forever. Chicago in 1832 still felt more like a small riverside settlement than a future metropolis. This illustration captures that early moment, with a few wooden buildings set along calm water and people going about everyday tasks. You can see canoes slipping across the river, children playing near the bank, and a rider crossing a simple bridge that tied the community together. Life moved at a slow, practical pace, shaped by the landscape and the needs of the day. It's a grounded, almost quiet scene that shows how Chicago looked before its rapid growth reshaped everything that came after. This sketch of Fort Dearborn, drawn in the 1850s, tries to show what Chicago looked like in 1831. Even though people questioned how accurate it was, it still gives us a sense of the small, scattered settlement that once stood along the river. You can see the fort sitting on slightly higher ground, surrounded by a handful of simple homes and outbuildings. The river winds quietly through the scene, reflecting a town that was still more frontier outpost than future city. It feels distant and modest, yet this is where Chicago's story began, long before the skyline took shape. This drawing shows Rice's Theater, the first real playhouse Chicago ever had. It stood on Lake Street and looked simple from the outside, but it carried a lot of ambition for a young city. Inside, some of the biggest actors of the era took the stage, bringing drama, comedy, and even the city's first opera to local audiences. It was a gathering place at a time when Chicago was still finding its identity. The theater didn't last long. A fire in 1850 brought it down, but its role in shaping Chicago's early cultural life left a mark that went far beyond the building itself. This 1853 bird's eye view shows Chicago right before everything changed. The city is small but buzzing with energy. You can see the grid forming, the river cutting through the center, and ships working the shoreline as trade grows. By 1857, Chicago looks completely different. The grid is now packed, the streets feel tighter, and the shoreline is busier than ever. You can see new industry taking shape along the river and more ships filling the harbor. The city is still young, but it's clear it's growing faster than anyone planned. Neighborhoods stretch far into the distance, giving a sense of how quickly people arrived, built homes, and connected everything with straight lines and rail lines. This photo captures Chicago in the quiet shock that followed the Great Fire of 1871. The city's core was reduced to broken columns, roofless walls, and piles of brick that once held entire blocks. The Grand Pacific Hotel and the Honoré Block stand in the distance as hollow shells, reminders of what had been there only days before. The scene feels still, almost unreal, as if the fire had swept through overnight and left the city frozen mid-breath. This illustration captures the fire in its earliest, most chaotic hours. What began near the O'Leary barn on the west side quickly turned into a wall of flames racing toward the river. A hard wind pushed burning debris from rooftop to rooftop, jumping streets and sweeping through entire blocks before people had time to react. From the water, the city looks like it's dissolving into smoke. Crowds gather along the pier, watching helplessly as the fire reaches the edge of the Chicago River, a barrier that once seemed dependable. In this moment, you can feel the fear of a city losing control. This drawing shows Chicago's early Union Depot at Adams, Canal, and Madison Streets, back when the city was growing fast and rail travel shaped everyday life. The station has a proud, almost ornate look, with tall mansard roofs and long covered platforms stretching out on both sides. Horse-drawn wagons and carriages crowd the dusty street, dropping off passengers or hauling freight. People move in and out of the depot with a sense of steady purpose. You can feel how important this place was. It wasn't just a train station. It was a gateway into a city that was learning how big it could be. This view of Michigan Avenue shows Chicago right as it was stepping into its modern identity. The Auditorium and Congress hotels rise in a long line of stone and steel, their facades detailed but confident, like they know they're shaping the skyline. Michigan Avenue feels orderly and open, with people moving along the sidewalks and carriages slipping past the storefront awnings. There's a sense of calm progress in the scene. Chicago had rebuilt, recovered, and learned how to grow upward. These buildings weren't just places to stay. They were markers of a city that understood its own ambition. This is the Home Insurance Building, the structure that changed city skylines forever. Built in 1885, it stood only 10 stories tall, but its steel frame made it revolutionary. Chicago had already rebuilt itself with confidence after the fire, and this building pushed that confidence into something bold. Streets around it look narrow and busy, filled with early cars and people moving through the workday. The building itself feels sturdy and clean, almost modest by today's standards. But this was the moment modern architecture began. Chicago didn't just grow upward, it taught the rest of the world how to build. This 1855 daguerreotype is one of Chicago's earliest surviving images, and it captures the Cook County Courthouse and City Hall when the city was still young. The building looks solid and heavy, with simple lines and a tall cupola rising above the roof. The photo itself feels dim and delicate, like it barely survived time. You can see people gathered along the steps, frozen in place by the long exposure, giving the scene a quiet, almost ghost-like feeling. It is a rare moment where Chicago's early civic life stands still, long before the skyscrapers and the noise arrived. This photo captures Blue Island Avenue in 1912, looking southwest from 18th Street. The street feels busy and alive, with trolleys running down the center and people moving between storefronts that line both sides. The buildings have that early Chicago mix of brick, towers, and rounded corners that makes the scene feel grounded and familiar. Horse-drawn wagons still share the road, but the city is clearly shifting into a more modern pace. Nothing about it feels staged. It's a real street on an ordinary day, showing a Chicago neighborhood that's growing, working, and finding its rhythm in the new century. This photo drops you right into the heart of the 1893 World's Columbian Exposition, Chicago's famous White City. You're looking over the Grand Basin toward the gleaming dome of the administration building, while the statue in the foreground seems to watch the whole scene unfold. Boats glide across the water, and the wide plazas are filled with visitors taking in a celebration meant to show the world what Chicago could become after the Great Fire. It feels both ambitious and surreal. A temporary city built to make a statement that Chicago was ready for the world stage. Looking back at these early moments, It's easy to see how much Chicago has reinvented itself. The quiet riverbank, the rough wooden streets, the first theaters and train stations, the rise from the Great Fire, and the bold new skyline all tell one long story of determination.